what the diplomas have meant to me. They have been opportunities to learn at such a high level that I can create and not be dependent on other people. I trade by day, perhaps. I actually am in the legal profession. I'm a lawyer and I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot. I have two children, and what I've always been very natural minded, very sort of health minded, very mindful of what I'm putting on my body. Once I had children, I was like, like I'm really super mindful of what I'm putting on them, in them, around them, the whole thing. And in the last about maybe 2 years or so, my youngest, who is now 8, she just was one of those girls that was just like super into like, oh mommy, can I put on your makeup? Can I put on this? Can I put on that? And so that kind of led a little bit into it. I've actually found the School of Natural Skincare because she was just so into all the little makeup that I had. And I was like, wouldn't that be a really fun Christmas present to make her a little eyeshadow palette, right? I Googled how to do this, right? So I'm coming across some, DIY mama's blogs, whatever, on how to make eyeshadow. And so I kind of started there. I got some mica powder. I got some jojoba oil and like arrowroot powder. And I'm like mushing this stuff together. And I was like, yeah, naturally it like didn't last. It totally like was just crumbling. It was just sort of a hot mess. It was the journey of kind of getting some books and getting some information and realizing I'm like, oh, I knew it's an industry, but the fact that it's accessible to like the everyday person. Actually, one of the books that I got was an A to Z cosmetic sort of skincare formulation book that was written by School of Natural Skincare. And it's basically a dictionary, right? It's a dictionary sort of all these terms, but I was like, what's chelating? What's this? And I read it from cover to cover and I got to the end and it's like, hey, you want to learn more? Check out our School of Natural Skincare. And that's what led me to it. And then I started with the actual skincare diploma. But having kind of dipped into that world because of makeup, I was just intrigued. And so then when the diploma care for makeup came out, I was like, oh, this is amazing. After creating my very terrible palette for my daughter, there were two trains going at the same time, right? To be honest, right? So there was this sort of, she's into sort of this makeup world. And as a dancer, there were other aspects of sort of her physical well-being that I wanted to pay attention to. And so that's why I actually ended up going towards the skincare first. And so there was no brand in mind at all. I was just looking to literally figure out, how do I put this and this together? Now I know the terminology and emulsion, but I was like, how do I make this to help her legs after dancing? That led me to reading more, led to the diploma in natural skincare. And I just kind of started developing stuff there. And then I was kind of dipping back into the makeup side of stuff because then she was coming up with all these different color palettes that she wanted. And I was like, okay, this will be fun. So it was still very fun. I feel like I was getting a little bit more serious about actually doing it well. And then I remember it was actually my husband. So it's like my two girls, my husband, were sort of all in the room. And my daughter and I were like mixing and matching all these little colors to come up with these shades that she just would love. And he kind of just flippantly sort of walked past and he was like, oh, look, it's little Nia Naturals. And I was like, wait a second, that could be something. And I was like, yes, we are Nia Naturals. And so it was just sort of a joking sort of moment. But then I was like, maybe. And the School of Natural Skincare gave me the opportunity to do that. So when we returned kind of to makeup, so I finished the skincare diploma. And then at the time, she's starting now, she was doing a bunch of recreational dance classes, but now she tries out for the competitive dance team. For the professional competitor dancers, it was specific shades, a specific application, a specific whole thing. So we got to that point, and now I'm like a year into sort of playing with all of these things. And Nia Natural's just floating in the back of my mind. But I was like, I'm going to make her own makeup. That is and I can't remember the timing of such, but it was like, I want to do that and I want to do it well. And so I kind of go back to the School of Natural Skincare and I was like, they have a makeup diploma. thinking back to the timeline, because the skincare diploma is definitely more substantive. There's just a lot more material there, so it takes longer. And the makeup diploma is just is it's less, right? But it builds on, like, having already done the skincare diploma. I was like, yep, I know what that means. I know what that means. I know what that means. I got very, very excited about the skincare diploma. I was working through that. I layered the makeup diploma on at the same time. So there was a period over the summer where I was like, why am I doing all this at the same time? And I was like, because I love it so much. So I was like finishing the makeup diploma in the midst of like sort of doing all these other things, but I absolutely loved it. And I do think, having had the big thing that I remember from last time, and it bled into this one, was how much theory and foundation and understanding that was just a game changer. Like, I wanted to jump to, module 12 and 30, and start actually getting into the formulations, but it's like modules 1 through 7 were the foundation. And I recognized that from from the skincare. And so when I came over to the makeup diploma, it was sort of the same thing. It was the color theory. It was like really sitting with those modules and the foundation. I was like, yes, this makes sense. This makes sense. I love it. And it was easier. I was just eating it up. Like, it was really, really exciting. And I think the other part of it was, I remember telling my husband, you look at the big brands, and good for them, kudos to big brands, but it's doable. Like, I looked at those ingredients, and again, when I compare that to where I started, wherever, 2 years ago, and just making my daughter something up from a blog, 3 little ingredients, my mind was really naive at that point, because I was like, well, if it only takes 3 ingredients, I don't understand what these other big brands are doing. Like, what are you doing, right? And then when I got into it, I was like, the at home, just play, make something to play for your 3-year-old. That's 3 ingredients. The actual professional, put yourself out there. This is a brand. I am professional. Is time and intention and purpose and really understanding all of those things. And in the makeup world, that's a lot. But once I again got in there, I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. I understand what this is. And so that has become something that's really important to my brand, is this ingredient transparency. And I really sort of began it like I was there. I didn't know what this meant, but now I understand what they are, their function, and why they need it, right? And why the products need it, and that's what separates, right, the sort of the DIY bloggers from the professional skincare. I think my biggest, like, yay me, go Leslie, having put together my daughter's palette for dance. I created samples so that I could share them with the studio owners and with some other parents. And this was like well over a year ago. They're like, oh, we love this. We love this. This is so great. So I approached them again this fall to say, what do you think about me sort of creating custom palettes for the studio? And they're like, we were just talking about that. So that is probably one of the biggest, like, exciting things. So we did the logo for the school, and I'm looking at that and I'm like, I created that, a cream pink, cream eyeshadow, and just like, I mean, custom color, all natural. I'm like, I did this. That's a super, super highlight. And then some of my just favorite concepts, I found that with eyeshadow, and I was never really aware of much of it. I really wasn't. I was like, whatever. Like, it was either overpriced. I didn't really like all this stuff in it. For me, for particularly eyeshadow palettes, you get a pack of like 30, just all the little shades, and I use like 3. So that was something else that I was thinking about in terms of how do I kind of separate myself out, I suppose, from the masses. So I didn't want to create palettes that had, outside of a custom palette, right? Like, this is custom, so, and these are all and only the colors that the girls are required, the dancers are required to wear, right? When I looked at the palettes, I was like, okay, I don't want stuff to get wasted. So I just started creating the little individual ones, but then I'm thinking about the color, okay? When I talk to like just a lot of my friends, and I'm thinking about even if my own daughters want to wear makeup, everybody wants natural. And I kept thinking about that. I'm like, okay, but natural for like my skin shade, right, is different than natural for your skin. So as I'm a huge lover of national parks. So we were always going to national parks like over the summer, and I just got this idea, and I was like, the colors that I'm looking at on the rocks and the hills and the trees, and like, this is natural. So I got really inspired to create color palettes truly based off nature. My thought was like, I think these will be complementary just across the board, right? So I came up with this one color palette. So this is a loose powder. If I can pull this one out, I'll just go this way. And I call this one Desert Plum. It's a very muted kind of color. Dusk was also another color that was in sort of the rock palette. Again, aside from a custom palette, I'm not coming out with like pinks and purples and blues and blah, blah. Like I'm really looking to nature. What's been sort of the most exciting thing about the things that I've created, that it feels so good. It's natural. It feels really lovely on. And I'm like, I created this, right? And so I've created like a cream eyeshadow. Look at that, Mom, it's so pretty. And it's so creamy. I call this Lip Boss because it is a creamy, luscious, fabulous combination of the thickness that you love of a lip balm, but the sheer that you love of a lip gloss. It really sinks in. It's very hydrating, it's moisturizing, and then you're still like, pucker up, here's my gloss. This process is literally the capstone of who I am. For as long as I can remember, if it was something that I could create, I will create it, as opposed to having somebody else do it for me or make it for me. I'm like, wait a minute, I can do that for myself, right? And sometimes it's driven by economic things, right? Like, okay, that's super expensive. Let me figure out how to make this myself. So there's a bit of that. But I also, and I've hopefully been imparting this in my girls too, I think there's something wonderful about being able to just make stuff with your own hands. And I think the other thing too with that is I'm not at the mercy of somebody else's sort of vision and dream, right? Like I get to create my own. So there's some stuff that I have to actually sort of buy, right? But when I get to resolve the I wish I could have something like this, and then I can actually say, oh, but I can, because I can create it. That for me is the most empowering. Like that's huge. I'm just not at the mercy of the big brands, and I love that. I think that if there's a driving motivation, you will do it. I think that's how I would phrase that, right? And so there's some stuff that I'm not motivated enough to do, so I will go buy it. That's fine. But there was a driving motivation that this was going to be a part of her world from a dance perspective, hopefully for a really long time. So it was worth the investment. So pros, cons, I'm thinking there's an initial investment of just getting ingredients, getting the raw ingredients. You can get little 2-ounce samples, which is where I started, right? 2-ounce samples of my apricot kernel oil, 2-ounce samples of this, 2 ounces. So for $20, I have a huge sample lot size that can make a lot of balm or body oil or whatever it is. And so it's the payoff is like, it's a no-brainer to me. There's an investment in resources. And so there can be a little bit of holder of like, that feels overwhelming. Not necessarily, right? You can start simple. I start with my little double boiler, a thermometer, my couple of beakers, rinse it out, like we're good to go. And that was enough to keep getting me started. And then as I've gotten, more proficient, I'm like, okay, yep, we need a little bit of a larger setup here. I need a couple more of these. I'm doing this at the same time, blah, blah. But you will do it if there's motivation enough to do it. And then the hurdle, like I said, I think is just resource intensive at the start, but it lasts. Very much a planner. I mean, this my life is just I just have to plan. I will say, as an educator that has then summers off, I knew summer was going to be my main time to just absorb as much as I could. That was like every day looking at the modules. Those were short enough to where it's like I could easily get through one module a day, and then reading, and then probably within 2 weeks I was already kind of playing around with stuff. So the reason, the length of the time was just making sure, doing all the quizzes, of course, reading through everything, and then having to do my assignments. The other one, the diploma for skincare, in terms of sort of spacing that out, that was longer. I mean, that was well over a year. I tried to spread out like sort of a module a week so I could really sit with it, learn with it. When I knew I had more time coming up, then I would try to be like, okay, I'm going to try to do 2 modules this week. Yeah, so that's kind of how I had to structure it. My product plan for 2024 is tracking what my daughter needs. I'm really trying to stay true to that. So even though I can make stuff on the side, I'm like, oh, this is for me. This is great. This is great. I'm trying to track in terms of product launches, if you will. I'm tracking what she needs next. The next thing then is I'm trying to recreate a natural lip stain because that is the product that she needs. So I have the color down, the pigment down, but now I got to get the formulation. But then also a dry body oil, a spray on. She would kind of be doing the lotion thing, but again, right, I just don't want her walking in to dance and now she's got like, lotion all over her hand. So I think that, like lip gloss, 100%, right? That's a total crossover, but thinking of the dancers and that you need a certain color and it needs to be able to do a certain thing and it needs to last a certain amount of time, then I would target it towards there. But this is something that like anybody could wear. My family and I, we are very much so in a season of creation and building generational wealth for our girls, which means also building a particular mindset of what you're capable of, right? So that way, whenever, we pass that we left them with skill sets that they can to create, they can figure out how to sort of do these things. And so we're just living this time of modeling that. So this is just one aspect of the larger purpose of like, as I've learned from like some of my lawyering sort of world, intellectual capital, investing in people's intellectual capital, which is constant just knowledge and learning and taking opportunities to learn. And that's what the diplomas have meant to me. They have been opportunities to learn at such a high level that I can create and not be dependent on other people. Because that's how all the, you know what I mean? Everything we look around us, that's how they get started because somebody said, this isn't here, it doesn't exist. So they've created it. And it's like, why can't that be us?